Change is inevitable. If I had $1 for every time I've heard that phrase over the course of my life, I would be a millionaire. And warning, you might be a multi-millionaire by the end of this episode. Yes, it does come up a little bit because we are talking about today change management. Mickey and I are going to go through the 4 key pillars of success as we see it to go through change management. Just have an open, honest conversation around going through when your organisation has change, communicating it out as a leader and as an employee, what you can do during that process. Hello and welcome to the Thinking Cap Solutions podcast, talking everything content, audience engagement and leadership. My name's Corey Kay. This gentleman is Mickey Maher.
Hey, Corey.
Mate. Everybody loves change, mate. You know that.
We'd like to think that that's the case, but let's be honest, most people don't.
Yeah, I've got my tongue fair in my cheek when I say that. You know, change can be really scary, but it is inevitable and we've seen it everywhere. I mean, I only need to go to Coles and Woolies. We've got these self-checkouts. Think back in the day, it was always about human connection. That is a significant change to a business that Coles and Woolies would have gone through to move from checkouts to then self-checkouts. There's quite a few examples of what change management is, but how would you define change management?
Well, it's moving from where you are now to where you need to be or where you want to be. So some of it's reactive to circumstances. So again, a lot of reactive change at the moment can be due to technology and the efficiencies that come with that. Others is because you are projecting where you want to be and you're within the control of the type of change. So you ideally want to be in control of the change as opposed to reacting to the change and not having been ready for that. So as I said, there's structural change, technology change, cultural change. There's a whole variance levels of different kind of change management. But typically the key is that they are an evolution of the type of processes and the impact on the people.
Let's go through the 4 key pillars of leading change, and they're clear vision and communication, engagement and buy-in, support and resources, and then adapt and iterate. Starting with clear vision and communication, how do you do it effectively?
Knowing the reasons why, how you're going to go about it, and then having your process to rolling that out. And that's things like creating your communication plan, right? So thinking around, okay, why are we doing this? What's the impact of the business, positive or negative? What's going to be the perception? Who do we need involved to help roll this out? Who are going to be the early adopters within the business? Who are those that are going to resist? And perhaps who are those that are going to absolutely be a roadblock for you? And having a strategy around managing that in a timely manner to get there. Because significant change is not easy to do. It requires a lot of plan because a lot of them fail more often than not because of poor planning and poor leadership execution. It's critical to have a clear vision on what, why, how, and then the communication piece.
How important is it, particularly when you go through change and there's some clear challenges that people would have? Do you think it's important to acknowledge that, or do we just move forward, this is going to happen, and this is how it's going to be done?
The ones that succeed at it are the ones that absolutely are empathetic to the challenges and what might come their way in regards to how it's perceived or received. So the real impact on people, jobs, those kind of things. So I think absolutely acknowledging that and having empathy to that and having a plan around how you're going to address that. Because ideally, great businesses, great cultures will have thought about that first and actually use that as part of their dialogue before there's even a chance for the questions to come your way. Because if you're sitting there and let's hope no one brings it up, then already, guess what? It's going to fester that negativity and that uncertainty, and then your job's going to be twice as hard to get through this. So smart businesses sit down, even if you've got a short turnaround, and absolutely think about, okay, what could be the resistance to this? What's the realities of this, and how are we going to speak to that? So being as open and honest as you humanly possibly can is important. Where those that fail are is where they are so oblivious and detached from the front line of their business that they don't understand and don't really take consideration for how it might impact, and they don't perhaps care or perceive to care. That's where change management fails dramatically.
And I think if you're listening and potentially going through this and you don't feel that you've got the clear vision from those up above, I would seek to understand that that's the only way you can actually be authentic with people. If I don't understand why you're trying to do this, it's very hard for me to then articulate, yep, I know that what the impact is going to be, but here's the why. You must have the why.
It also helps when you've got a C-suite and a CEO that understands the importance of that. And we've worked with a CEO that was actually fantastic at getting around to local level markets and would be so honest around this is where things happen. Sometimes he was told from his fellow C-suiters to go, hey, you're being too open here. But that was a great quality of his that allowed staff to feel, wow, he trusts us enough and he's being honest enough so we can actually have a greater context. And it's a lot easier to walk away from that to go, okay, I don't necessarily agree with that, but at least I've got context now.
All right, let's go to pillar number 2, and that's engagement and buy-in. I actually won't go into the minutiae of it. You were headed up with actually implementing change, which in our media business was significant. It was a team that was essentially split into 2, and it had all kinds of implications. People having different reporting lines, roles and responsibilities that were divvied up, people geographically being moved, and potentially a silo look on it. How did you go about making change and knowing that there's going to be a fallout with people? How did you get their buy-in?
Well, again, seeking to understand why we're trying to achieve this, because I actually have to believe in the idea and believe what we're doing is absolutely the right thing to do, not just for the business, but for the people as well. So as soon as I understood that, it was easier for me to understand the narrative to how I would then address it. Then I start to think about going, okay, who are those that are absolutely going to embrace this and perhaps be ambassadors for me and that I can bring on board? Who are those that perhaps might be resistant to change? So I might need to have early dialogue to address it, over a longer period of time. And perhaps who are those going to be the roadblocks and what might be my approach to try and navigate that as best I can? Because again, what's important here is to understand is that most people are reluctant to change. So if you think you can get successfully through change management with everyone's going to be 100% happy and it's going to go absolutely perfect, you're wrong. But the intent is to set yourself up for greater success, and that is to have a great plan, great communication, strong leadership, great clarity, so you minimise the impact. But don't think that you're only successful with change management when 100% of everyone is on board and it goes absolutely perfectly, because that's just not the reality. And that was what I was faced with, where we had all of that. I had people that I knew would be on board early, those that would take some time and some convincing, and then those that were, no matter what, they were never going to like it and nothing was going to change that.
You talk about roadblockers and those who resist. There are ways to play to people to ensure that they get on board. How does that look?
Well, in the instance of the significant change that we were rolling out, was I knew that one of my peers was absolutely not going to be overly happy with it. Why? Because they've for a long time always had their fingerprints in the music area, and all of a sudden they're being told that stay away, that's not your remit anymore. So for me, I needed to understand how they were going to take that feedback. Do I simply just go, you know what, stay out of it, you've been told the CEO supports this? Or do I find a way to make sure that this is mutually beneficial? Because what I knew in particular with this person was that if I didn't speak to a bit of their ego and a bit of what's going on, it's going to be problematic for a long period of time. And it's just going to be this thorn in my side that's going to constantly come up. And rather than how do I nip it in the butt reasonably quickly? So I started with a conversation. I know you're not probably happy with this, but it makes sense, but I want to make sure it works for both of us. And I want to make sure that you and I mutually have a dialogue where you can speak if there's concerns, and equally that I can come to you. So how can we make this work? And I sort of put it back on them to go, well, you tell me what you need, and hearing them out. So as soon as I gave them ability to air their frustration, but also say, I hear you and I'm not out to make your job harder, so let's actually be united and let's work together on this, then straight away their body language changed, and pretty quickly it became that they turned into a bit of an ambassador as well. And anytime there was a problem, rather than make life difficult, we could just have an open dialogue. And it also meant that I didn't have to pull out the card of, let's just go to the CEO and go, mate, he's causing a problem, can you shut it down? Which I could have easily done, but that's no good to anyone.
And what I take from that, I think you're being very nice around it, by the way. It sounds to me like you've parked your own ego to massage someone else's, to make them feel a part of this process, to have somewhat of the power of the decision in order to get them where you need them, which is supporting it. Could have called the CEO. It could have thrown that out there, and that'd be the quick way to do it. And also, you're well within your rights. But you've actually cast that aside to then have someone who becomes a foot soldier. Some would say it's manipulation. Yeah, it probably is. But I think it's a smart way of getting people on board, identifying they don't want to be told by me how to suck eggs, so I'm not going to. And
our relationship became stronger for it.
So clear vision and communication, then we're moving to taking that engagement and buy-in, support and resources.
Sometimes businesses go, okay, we need to change here, and they miss the step of, well, actually, do we have the resources we need to actually facilitate this? And do we have the support? So in the instance of what we did is, we started to split up people's roles and responsibilities. So, but we weren't increasing our headcount. So we needed to think around going, okay, do we have the resources and the support to absorb that other workload? And that wasn't an easy yes. It actually took some time and some negotiation and some consideration in each individualized instance to think around, okay, well, how do we ensure that you can deliver what you still need to do, even though you perhaps now got less resource?
Pillar number 4, I think this is a critical one, and we talk a lot about constantly doing the review of whatever you're putting into place. No different in this situation with change management. You want to adapt and iterate.
What you set out to do and where you land may be different and likely to. Ideally, not too far off the mark because you put a lot of great planning into it, but it's inevitable. And in the instance where I was leading through this structural change, we needed to evolve. We realised reasonably quickly that what we set out to do was going to absolutely work, but not necessarily at the full level of how we've implemented it. So we had to look at what adaptations we needed to make to ensure it was effective. The change was so significant that there was this gap in between. So while in large the execution and implementation was successful, we still needed to rein it back a bit. So that adaptation needed to happen for the ongoing and immediate effectiveness of the greater business.
So change is inevitable, Mickey, and we've gone through the process to hopefully communicate and put change into place if you're a leader. But there are those who are employees who aren't a part of any of the decision making and are byproducts of it. What advice would you give to them during change?
Well, we talked about this in our redundancy podcast, and that is around what can you do within your control now to upskill yourself and to future-proof yourself as best you can. So look around you, look at your industry that you're in or the one that you want to be in, and what changes are you seeing and what's being talked about. And for some of it, in particular, if you think about, there's a lot of this talk around AI. So what do you know about AI? So I guess upskilling yourself, equipping yourself for adaptability, because while most people don't like change, if you're not prepared for change, you'll most likely be the one that gets left behind. And if you need support with change management, we can help you with that. We've lived and breathed it plenty of times over our 30-odd years in media. Please reach out to us, thinkingcapsolutions.com.au, or on LinkedIn, Thinking Cap Solutions, all one word.